transmitting from the Mojave Wilderness in Joshua Tree, California. Now is the time for Desert Oracle Radio, the voice of the desert.
Night has fallen on the desert, our favorite time of day when desert summer comes a-callin'. Although there's no real sense in complaining about it, it's the desert Southwest in summertime. What else were you expecting? And in truth, which we are somewhat dedicated to on this program, though not to the point of stomping all the fun out of anything worthwhile, it hasn't been all that hot out. Not yet. Not yet this year. Temperatures have been below average, or right about what you'd expect in much of the arid West. As weather is always changing, sometimes the scorcher visits the Mojave, and sometimes it visits New York City. And when it visits New York City, well, they say you can't even turn on the air conditioner because they don't have any electricity to spare from the Taylor Swift wedding at the indoor sports arena. They're starting to treat New Yorkers like Europeans. No AC in the summertime. Our greatest climate control device of the Mojave, the swamp cooler, doesn't work too well on the East Coast. You need a very dry climate for the evaporative cooler to work. Water is nice and all, but water everywhere means very high humidity, plus billions of disease-ridden mosquitoes, and ticks, too. I see ticks maybe 3 or 4 times a year in the Mojave after that 1 week when it rains. The deer lose a few of their ticks coming down the mountains, and a few of those ticks get on a random weed stalk and wait for a coyote or a bobcat or my old dog to walk by. But if you have a short-haired dog, it's fairly easy to find a tick, which immediately crawls under the only shelter it can find on a short-haired dog, right under the collar. Anyway, good for Taylor Swift, finally finding a husband after all these years of making songs about trying to find a husband. Now what's she gonna write about? And good for her new husband, too. Good old Kelsey Grammer. They're gonna name the first baby George Washington Jr. in honor of the night he was conceived at Madison Square Garden. No wonder cameras weren't allowed. Now, I'm no billionaire pop singer, but if I was getting married, I'd want to have the wedding maybe outside in May, when the weather's nice. Outside the old church house, under the willow tree, in the fresh air, instead of under the train station in Midtown Manhattan. Probably the filthiest place on earth. A place of pestilence and wretched urban July. Maybe she's gonna get a reservation in May. Everybody wants to get married in May, and being a billionaire isn't what it used to be. But I've got some good news for those of you hoping for some of nature's air conditioning in the desert, the Sonoran and the Great Basin deserts in particular. Although the eastern Mojave will also be affected. Monsoon season is on the way, and the weather prediction markets say it's going to be a real wet monsoon time. And the monsoon action is going to rise up pretty far north, reaching well into the Great Basin from the eastern Sierra, clear out to Elko and to Salt Lake City and even Cheyenne. Those wildfires in Arizona and Utah will hopefully get a good soaking, although monsoon thunderstorms bring lightning strikes too. But there's a lot of that moisture that will be sucked up from the Sea of Cortez and points south, And there is nothing better than a heavy monsoon drenching after a spell of hot, dry summer in the desert. Especially after this coming week, when temperatures will be rising across the southwest. We've had it pretty easy so far, but as the summer heat dome breaks up over the northeast U.S., we're getting a high-pressure system over the mountain and desert southwest. Our own heat dome that will especially aggravate the smoky conditions because there will be little air movement and low humidity. Monsoon rains start by mid-July, Zeus willing.
Desert Oracle Radio.
I like summer all right, it's fine. I like the 4th of July parties and the pretty fireworks, the rodeo up in Bishop and the Independence Day parade in Flagstaff. Sometimes I even do some river running. When people are kind enough to invite me and I can get the time off, get out of the radio studio and away from the mailbox full of bills. But truth be told, there's nothing I like better than the fall, which, with the passing of summer solstice, is now officially on the way. With every passing day of the summer, scorcher or not, we are on the march towards autumn, towards cooler days and longer nights, the time of graveyards and ghost stories. It's always time for ghost stories. Or just wait for nighttime, maybe on that little river beach of pebbles and sand and driftwood, where you've camped for the night on your river run, a campfire crackling close to the water, safe as milk, the canyon walls fading up into the black sky above, only the stars to show where rock ends and sky begins. When every rustle in the cottonwoods behind you might just be something you don't want to meet tonight or any night. We don't have to wait for October, is what I mean. Tonight's just right for a ghost story you maybe haven't heard before. Although it's an old one. An oldie but a moldy, as the DJs used to say. There was a certain writer, one of those stoic types who was working on his great book. He hoped it would be great, at least. But he was pretty well known and had a little money and some time off for his purpose. So he spent some time investigating this town where he would spend the season writing his masterwork. And a big old house caught his eye. You know the type. It was spacious, somewhat isolated at the edge of the neighborhood, with a big garden and lots of mature trees. The whole thing walled for privacy. The mansion was obviously vacant, the yard a bit overgrown. And then he saw the for rent sign. The price was right there, and it was a bargain. And see, he wanted peace and quiet, not designer drapes and a monthly bill to match. So he took down the information, and then he inquired around the neighborhood. What was the story with this vacant house? What the writer learned was this. In the dead of the night, a noise like the clashing of iron was frequently heard. And if you listened with attention, it sounded like the rattling of chains. At first from a distance, but then approaching nearer by degrees. And then a phantom appeared, in the form of an old man, extremely meager and squalid, with a long gray beard and bristling hair. And he was rattling the shackles on his wrists and ankles. What about the prior residents? Had they experienced this horror? Yes. The miserable inhabitants passed away many sleepless nights under the most dismal terrors imaginable. And for the last tenants, the final tenants, this nocturnal torture proved too much. That family was no longer around. Those people had been, in fact, scared to death. And ever since, the big house had been left deserted, being judged by all to be absolutely uninhabitable. The place was now entirely abandoned to the ghost, but in hopes that some tenant might be found who was ignorant of this great calamity, a sign was put up, giving notice that the miserable mansion was available for either lease or sale. Well, this author was not prone to hysteria and was, in fact, known for being a penny pincher, a real cheapskate. So he went back to town and he contacted the real estate agency. The extraordinary cheapness of the lease had raised both his suspicion and his interest in the property. Instead of being discouraged by the neighbors' tales of previous occupants being literally scared to death, he was in fact more strongly inclined to rent the place. And in short, he actually did so. The mystery had intrigued him nearly as much as the inexpensive rent. He asked that his bed be prepared in the front of the house by the large study where he arranged his writing table. And as night fell upon the creaking old mansion, he concentrated his mind upon the task at hand, which was writing his book. And by lamplight, he did just that. The first part of the night passed with the expected silence, but as the hour grew late, and he scribbled away at his work, the unmistakable sound of clanking iron chains could be heard from the shadows. He neither lifted up his eyes nor laid down his pen, but closed his ears by concentrating his attention. The noise increased and advanced nearer, till it seemed at the door of the study. And at last, right there in the chamber, he looked around and saw the apparition exactly as it had been described. The ragged ghost stood before him, beckoning with a finger. The writer, incredibly, raised a finger to the ghost, making a clear signal that the apparition should wait a little. And then he returned to his writing. At this, the phantom raised its chains over the author's head, rattling them much louder now, then gaining the stubborn writer's attention again, beckoned as before. With that, the unflappable author picked up his lamp and followed the ghost, who slowly stalked along, encumbered by its heavy chains. Out into the courtyard they went, the specter and the man. And with that, the ghost faded into the darkness outside. It was gone, chains and all. The night was, once again, utterly silent. Standing in the very place where the apparition had vanished, the writer grabbed a handful of leaves off the tree closest to him and marked the spot so it would be clear by morning's light. With that, he retired to bed and slept without disturbance. The next day, he went to the police. He told them he'd taken up residence in the notorious haunted house and advised them to dig up that very spot he'd marked in the garden. And there, with the writer watching, they made a gruesome discovery, finding a shallow grave with bones and strings of white hair commingled and intertwined with chains and shackles. For the body had moldered away by long lying in the ground, leaving the skeleton bare of flesh and corroded by the iron fetters. The bones were collected and then buried at the public expense, with proper religious ceremony and full honors. Afterwards, the house was haunted no more. The wretched soul had been released from its long torment. The haunted house was in Athens, Greece, not Georgia. And the author at the story's center was Athenodorus Canaanites. Athenodorus, or Athenodorus, depending on how you like to pronounce it, was a Stoic philosopher held in high enough regard that he had been personal tutor to Octavian, Caesar Augustus. Octavian, it is said, was directly rebuked by his teacher, who instructed the Caesar to control his anger and recite the alphabet until his emotions cooled. Good advice to this day. Athenodorus was from a town called Canana, which was right outside Tarsus, the ancient city famed as the meeting place of Antony and Cleopatra, and also the birthplace of St. Paul of Tarsus. Athenodorus had been director of the Great Library there, one of the greatest of the ancient world, with more than 200,000 books. And while his own works did not survive the 2,019 years since he died, at the age of 81, He is well remembered in surviving texts by his close friend Strabo and in letters by Pliny the Younger, who told this ghost story, the oldest known haunted house story and the defining standard of the genre. Where did he tell it? In a collection of horror tales he sent by letter to Sura, and found today in Pliny the Younger's Book 7, letter number 27, from the Loeb edition of 1915. About a half dozen of his works are remembered by title, and the one that intrigues me most was titled Perambulations. Or, as Henry David Thoreau titled his own collection on this same topic, so essential to philosophers then and now, On Walking. Have you had your walk today? Sometimes we get worried when the dog hasn't had a walk, and we forget that we also haven't had a walk. Anyway, don't think that such ghost tales are limited to the past. That such ghostly encounters are confined to the times before our lives and culture were so terribly disconnected and disenchanted from the nature and fable of the pre-modern age. I've got another ghost story to tell you, and this one is from this past weekend. It just happened. It seems that Bill Schultz, a television personality who is on Twitter, was staying in an old house in Gettysburg, a home away from home, as he put it. And it's right there on the historic, blood-soaked battlefield of the Civil War. This was his brief report that I saw on Saturday. I am on the porch of my 18 and 34 era Gettysburg home away from home at 3:30 a.m. in the middle of the battlefield, and I just heard horses go by. Yeah, no horses here. Later that day, Schultz wandered amongst the many war memorials outside his old house and posted this.
I know what I heard, and it was weird. It was a lot of horses outside of my 1834 place in Gettysburg, and there were no horses, and there were no men. But I've been trying throughout this battlefield to find something else, and I haven't.
He sounds spooked. He ought to have a drink or something. That's Bill Schultz on Twitter X. You can see it yourself. And because the phantom remnants of great battles is one of my specialties, I replied to him. I said, this is something people have reported from the plain of Troy and Waterloo to all the famed and bloody Civil War battlefields. People of a sensitive and poetic disposition are most likely to hear the horses and see the phantom hosts. You should get this book from the Gettysburg Museum, which is right by you there. Civil War Ghost Trails. Stories from America's Most Haunted Battlefields by Mark Nesbitt. And Bill Schultz did not reply, did not even like my post. Well, to hell with him. May he be trampled by ghostly horses. Maybe he already was. which would be appropriate as William Dawes Schultz says he's a direct descendant of the William Dawes who took part in Paul Revere's Midnight Ride on April 18, 1775. It was Dawes who rode out of Boston just before the British sealed off the town. His job was to warn John Hancock and Samuel Adams that they were now in danger of being captured by the redcoats, the lobster backs. From Amboy to Zzyzx and across the Great Mojave Wilderness, this is Desert Oracle Radio, broadcasting from KCDZ 107.7 FM in the high desert, Friday nights at 10 p.m. Thanks to our patrons, the too few, who support this radio show and podcast at desertoracle.com and patreon.com/Desert Oracle. You'll get another long live episode of Campfire Stories coming up shortly, along with a complete and commercial-free archive of every Desert Oracle radio show and live special going back to the beginning, 9 years of DOR. Hundreds of hours of fine radio written and produced for you, the Desert Seeker. Whether you're in Death Valley by campfire light or New Jersey during a power outage. Thanks to Red, Blue, Black, Silver for our soundscapes tonight. A quick reminder that August 14 and 15 at Pappy and Harriet's and the Desert Willow Ranch across the way in Pioneer Town. Desert Oracle will be at the Spacecraft Festival with all kinds of electronic artists, including Tangerine Dream and Steve Roach, and an outdoor screening of Welcome Space Brothers. Go online to Spacecraft Joshua Tree. 1 and 2 day tickets on sale now. August in Pioneer Town. I'm gonna leave my winter coat at home, I think. Hope you had a good Independence Day weekend if you're in the USA. And a happy official summertime to you all. Thanks for listening. And good night from the voice of the desert.